no further ado, I'll introduce Padraig.
I'll just call Oliver up just for a moment. Oliver and Des are with me tonight, and thankfully they give up their time to come here tonight. You may have seen some of them floating around town on Easter Sunday or Monday between Smithfield and O'Connell Street. Well, the uniform Oliver is wearing, as you can see, Oliver is wearing, if you just want to step over here, Oliver, for a moment. Yeah. One on each side, so it's easier. So Oliver here has the tunic on, and he was an ambulance member, and I'm an officer, as you can see. I'm wearing the black band around my hat. Oliver, the NCOs and the ambulance members wore these. So the members, when they joined, this is their uniform. They had no pockets on the top or bottom. The officers did, as you can see. My tunic has pockets on top and bottom. That was the officer's tunic, and I wore my markings and insignia on my collar, the hideout collars, whereas the members would have worn them on the arms. And also, if you just turn around, Oliver, see the members also wore the white stripe down the sides of the trousers. So this was distinguished between an officer in St. John Ambulance and this uniform. To be honest with you, hasn't really changed much over the years. We still have this as a number one dress wear, only that it's an open neck tunic. And we don't see many of these tunics around anymore because I suppose with time the organisation had to change too with times, and we started to bring in baseball caps and operational wear, which is something you would see at Crow Park or Lansdowne Road or Concert or so on. But these are the tunics. Just to mention as well, he would have carried wound dressings in here, so probably sphagnum moss and stuff to soak with blood and gunshot wounds and just major hemorrhages. And also then the water bottle too. There's no drink, no alcohol in these, just with water. Although sometimes it could have been used for patients. But yeah, so that's really it, Oliver. Is there anything else I'm missing in the uniforms? And the white kit bag as well, of course, yeah. As you can see, I'm wearing this uniform tonight. It's part of the talk, which I will ask a question, maybe to one or two people in the audience, is to identify a photograph, and I can then link in why I'm wearing this tonight. Okay, that's great. Just to get started, as May said, I've been working I've been volunteering in St. John's for 16 years now, and up until last year, at the 99th anniversary, I contacted our commissioner, Mr. John Hughes, and I always knew we must have had some sort of records or something in our basement. Now, of course, we had stuff in the 50s and 60s, because we generally went through them, and the administration staff would have looked through these records. But I always had a feeling, listen, well, there's so many trunks and stuff down there. I'm sure, you know, it hasn't all gone. Somebody hasn't literally gone through like a needle in a haystack and picked everything out one by one. So that's what I did last April. And I found trunks in the basement, and the address on the trunks was 40 Merrion Square. So for me, looking at 40 Merrion Square, I was thinking, well, when was the last time St. John Ambulance was in 40 Merrion Square? Well, St. John Ambulance first started our first headquarters was on 51 Dawson Street, okay? And we were in 51 Dawson Street right up until 1916. And in January 1916, Mr. James English, who was one of the gentlemen in Merrion Square, who was part of the War Hospital Supply Committee, and they gave the house, 40 Merrion Square, to St. John Ambulance and the British Red Cross Society, which I'll talk about in some of the slides. But just to get to the point, the 40 Merrion Square, the last time we were there was 1929. So I was thinking, wow, God, there must be really old records in these. And inside these boxes I found some portrait photographs, over 220 of them, postcard-sized photographs, and they were all pre-1922. So it was amazing to see some of these photographs. And thankfully, over 180 of those are signed, which is very, between collections between here and across the UK, it's very unusual to get so many portrait photographs, postcards signed. But I found out why. Dr. John Lumsden, because the organisation was so big in Ireland in 1916, when he was writing to the superintendents in charge of their divisions, whether it was Tipperary, Galway, or Dublin, he wanted to have a photograph of them. So so when he was writing the letters, he used to take out the photograph, and so he'd know who he was writing to, you know. So it's interesting. So we'll just move on. A little bit about St. John Ambulance. What I'm going to do is give you an insight to the organisation, and then we can catch up then on 1916. So when did it start? So St. John Ambulance Association, you can see the badge on the left-hand side, the emblem. The association started in 1880 after a meeting held in the RDS in Dublin. Now, what is the St. John Ambulance Association? It was set up to, as you can see, primary teaching body. So its primary role was teaching. Started teaching the Royal Irish Constabulary, the Dublin Metropolitan Police, the Dublin Fire Department, which is now known as DFB, Dublin Fire Brigade. And it was made up of doctors from Trinity College, Royal College of Surgeons, And there's a big connection between RCSI and St. John Ambulance, as we had over 5 or 6 of our doctors in St. John Ambulance went on to become presidents of the Royal College of Surgeons. So we'll mention that in a moment. So they started in 1880 and the association finished in 45, so let's move on. The St. John Ambulance Brigade. Okay, so this is with St. John's Brigade is the uniformed organisation. It started in Guinness's. I suppose no better place to set up an organisation. So this is this amazing man, Dr. John Lumsden, incredible man. I don't know where he got the time. He was the founder and he was the first commissioner. So the teaching body, the St. John's Association, they didn't wear uniforms. It was primarily just a teaching body made up of doctors and medical professionals. And Dr. John Lumsden saw there was a need to set up a brigade, a uniformed organisation. There was no really official ambulance service in Dublin to provide the necessary needs for the people of Dublin or Northern Ireland. The Dublin Fire Brigade did exist, but they were set up into only 3 ambulances, would you believe, in 1916. And obviously looking at the population, and it didn't meet that demand. So John Lumsden started setting up ambulance divisions. The first one was set up in St. James's Gate in 1903, and this is how the uniformed organisation came about. So there was a division set up in Guinness's. Okay, it's great, we have a St. John Ambulance Brigade ambulance division in Guinness's, a uniformed organisation of 130 members signing up in 1904. So the Burkey disaster, I'm sure all of you know this monument, the Burkey monument. It was put up for Padraig, who was the constable. We'll just talk about that now in the connection. So what happened? May 6, 1905, a workman named John Fleming, he climbed in a manhole to investigate a broken pipe, and he was overcome by gas. And one of the first people on site to come across these corporation workers who were overcome by the gas was John Thompson. John Thompson, who was he? Well, John Thompson was a member of the St. John Ambulance Brigade in St. James's Gate. And he was the only first aid person trained on site. So John Thompson had a meeting with Dr. John Lumsden, and they decided that they need to set up a public division. It's no good just having them in Guinness's. We need to get public divisions set up. So this is how this is how the City of Dublin division came about. So now we have a public division, and would you believe this division is actually still active? They meet every Monday in Leeson Street from 8 to 10, and it's made up of doctors, nurses, and health professionals as well. And not necessarily, you don't have to have experience to join the organisation. You get that when you join. But this is the first division that was set up. This is actually in the Lord Ivy's gardens. Because of the connection with Guinness's, Lord Ivy used to always give us the gardens every year for doing drills and presentations and reviews and so on. And over 1,000 members used to get these reviews for many years in the Ivy Gardens. So that's the City of Dublin division. It came about after the Burkey disaster. Okay, so what's happening now? We're bringing you closer to now towards 1916. So we don't only have divisions in workplaces such as Brook Thomas, St. James's Gate, the Dublin Port Milling Division. There was loads of divisions springing up across Dublin. And here's a picture of Dundrum Division, as you can see, in 1915. They actually had up to 120 nursing members in their division. And this photograph as well is 1915. Somewhere in Dundrum, I imagine. So I'm still trying to track down the house if it's still there. But there's a connection all around Dublin with St. John Ambulance up in 1915. Another one I just put in as well was Brook Thomas. As you can see, Brook Thomas is still around today. And I'm contacting these companies and saying, did you know you had a St. John Ambulance division in 1916? No. It's amazing to think that this history has just been hidden for over 100 years. And Brook Thomas division, I actually came across an archivist recently, and he said, I mentioned this in some of the collection that I found with Brook Thomas. And his I think it was his great-grandmother, was it, Oliver? That great-grandmother had, her father was in this division, so it was just out of pure luck we came across the name, and it just linked in. So just to move on, I want to kind of give you an insight to some of the members as well. So what type of members do we have in the organisation? Well, we're going to take a look at this gentleman here. This is Sir John Ross, as you can see, Baronet. Who was he? Well, he was the president of the teaching body of St. John Ambulance. And what was his role outside St. John Ambulance? As you can see on the right there, he was the Lord Chancellor of Ireland. So he's the president of the St. John Ambulance Association. And his deputy, Sir Thomas Maloney, he was also a member of the St. John Ambulance Association. And when he was president, obviously he oversaw the governance and making sure it was run properly, and he overseeing all the kind of legality side of things, and certificates and so on. But if you look on the right-hand side as well, Sir John Ross actually has a witness account as well from 1916, and it's quite interesting because he talks about receiving phone calls from the Under Secretary's office as well in Dublin Castle when the fighting broke out and stuff. But that was his role in St. John Allen's in 1916. So he was president of the teaching body. Just to move on to another gentleman, so I wanted to kind of get a balance of the organisation, and I thought it was important to start looking into individuals, and which I've looked into probably, I'd say, over 50 individuals at this stage, and written quite a bit about them. So who's John J. Doyle? He's born in Dunleary 81. He's a founding member of the Catholic Boys Brigade. He joined the City of Dublin Division in 1906. In 1912 he went to England and he served with the Royal Naval Auxiliary Sigbert Reserve. He joined the Irish Volunteers. He became Captain of Medical Services in 1914 and then Director of Medical Services of the Irish Volunteers. So it's amazing to think that this gentleman here, when he joined the Irish Volunteers, Thomas MacDonagh actually found out that he was an instructor in St. John Allen's, and he identified the skills he had and the skills he possessed. So he used those and he appointed him as captain. But when James Connolly found out about the courses he was teaching members of Cummin Bon, he was teaching the officers in the Irish Volunteers on Dawson Street on Saturdays, and on Thursday he was teaching the NCOs. So he actually identified that there was no medical service set up, or there was no medical contingency within the Irish Volunteers, and it's something that worried him. It's something that he wanted to put more time into. But what happened? Unfortunately, because he signed up with the Royal Naval Auxiliary, the war started. He had to go, and he actually served in the First World War. And what's remarkable too is he made it back for the Easter Rising, and he actually operated on James Connolly, the GPO. So that's amazing to think this guy served in the First World War, and here he is. And there was two other guys with him too. There was a Royal Army Medical Corps doctor. He was taken prisoner in the GPO, and there was a student doctor named Jim Ryan. He was there with him, and he performed surgery on James Connolly. So it's amazing to think that we have members like this who looked after James Connolly. There's also another interesting one as well, just to mention. There's also another member who talks about his brother-in-law who looked after James Connolly in Dublin Castle, and he was in St. John Allen's. So there's a connection that's coming from one to the other. It's good. But James Connolly found out who he was and obviously identified his skills and appointed him as Director of Medical Services. Now, this again is Thomas MacDonagh on the left and then James Connolly on the right. So this is just an insight to John J. Doyle again. It's not a complete chain of command, but it's Padraig Pearse on some posters and stuff in 1916. He was claimed to be the president of the Provisional Irish Government, and some people argue that even still today. But James Connolly then, he was the Commandant General of the Irish Volunteers, and then you can see Kathleen Lynn, Chief Medical Officer. That's not something that I found really a link with John J. Doyle, because John J. Doyle was the Director of Medical Services, so he set up the first aid teaching side in St. John Allen's, and also in the Irish Volunteers. So just to move on. Another member I looked at, District Surgeon Mather Thompson. He done his training here in this college in the Royal College of Surgeons, and this is one of the portraits that I found in their collection in Leeson Street. And it's amazing to think that it's remarkable. It's in great conditions, close to 100 years old. So Dr. Mather Thompson. So we have members in St. John Allen's who are first aiders, and they're almost like surgeons in 1916, because it's amazing to think that these actually started clotting wounds and treating civilians who suffer from bomb blasts and so on. So what was he doing in 1916? This is amazing. So he gave advanced lectures on first aid on March 14th. Okay, was concluded the last of a series of 6 lectures given by Dr. Mather Thompson, District Surgeon in number 12 District. And you can see in the portrait photograph, he's wearing his Royal Army Medical Corps uniform, but he was a District Surgeon in headquarters in St. John Allen's. So these lectures were advanced in character and were intended for those who had already passed an examination, so a bit more advanced, a step up from just first aid. The first lecture was given in the Royal Dublin Society, and the remaining 5 were given in Jacobs Recreational Hall. Well, we had a division in Jacobs as well, just like we had one in James Gate. Jacobs was actually one of the biggest divisions in St. John Allen's in 1916. And again, they're having an exhibition, and there's nothing in it to mention they had any connection with St. John Allen's, because they didn't know. It's the stuff that's been hidden again for so long. So the attendance was large, averaging from 500 to 600 members. So here you have 500 to 600 members getting advanced lectures a month before the rising. So it's amazing to think. So the chair people like this were Dr. John Lumsden, Walter Clegg Stevenson, you probably know Stevenson's ward in James's Hospital. It's named after, he was another doctor in St. John Ambulance. And obviously, famously, Dr. Ella Webb, remarkable lady. She was second in command of St. John Ambulance in 1916. So let's move on. So the lecture, this was taken from, as well, just quoted again from the editor. The lecture was a vivid and interesting style, dealt with the treatment of fractures, hemorrhage, unconsciousness, poisoning, in a manner which was made his listeners feel like Oliver Twist, that they wanted more. And the remark of Dr. Lumsden, the Deputy Commissioner, at the concluding lecture, that Dr. Matthew Thompson might be described as a star turn of the brigade in Ireland. And it was loudly applauded. So obviously they greatly appreciate these advanced lectures that Matthew Thompson had set up. So it is felt that these lectures have been much of a benefit to all first aiders who had the privilege of hearing them. And it is hoped that at a future date the gifted lecturer may be induced to extend the series to an event larger circle of hearers. So it's amazing to think that, you know, I always just, when I came across this was just, again, in the collection, and it was a book from 1916, a journal published by St. John Ambulance, and here we have these amazing accounts that, again, it's been hidden for so long. So we'll have a look at the organisation. You can see it's spread across 20 counties in Ireland in 1916, 47 nursing divisions, and 32 ambulance divisions, basically men and women. So if you can see, you've just over 1,100 men and almost 1,600 women. So just under 3,000 members, and the women outnumbered the men. Now the war did put the organisation up by about 800, almost close to 1,000 members, but it was already about 2,000 strong before the war started anyway. To move on to Holden Stoddart, who was he? I'm not sure if many of you have heard about him, but I've written a lot about this guy, and he's the main reason why I'm here today, I suppose. He inspired me to get this research together because the St. John Ambulance published a centenary book in 2003, and it mentioned that there was somebody killed during the Rising, and there wasn't much more information about that. So I set off in search to find out who was Holden Stoddart. So let's look into it. So he grew up in Blackrock. His father was a journalist for the Irish Times, serving with the Irish Times for just over 60 years. The man died in his early 90s. Thomas Alexander Stoddart. He moved to Stamer Street in the early 1900s and with 2 servants in the home there. And in 1916, the family lived in 15 Northumberland Road with 3 servants in the home. So it's amazing, yeah, the family lived quite close to a really first battle that took place the Battle of Mount Street there. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So back to St. James's Gate. Why am I bringing you back here? Well, this is where Holden started his career after he attended the high school, and he worked in the accounts department in Guinness's. And generally, when people worked in firms like this in administration, they progressed really quickly through the ranks of the organisation. It was generally just the way things were then. Holden was one of the oldest members of St. John Ambulance, joining the first registered division, which was on the March 18th, 1904. In October 1914, he was promoted to superintendent of St. James's Gate Division. So he's in the organisation not too long, and now he's in charge of the division he started in. In 1916, he was appointed course superintendent. Basically, he was also in charge of all the members in Dublin under Dr. John Lumsden, and he was in charge of St. James's Gate. He was also responsible for mobilising the 500 members who went off and served in the First World War. Quite a little has been known about that too. John J. Doyle, I mentioned to you, he wasn't compelled to go and serve in the war, and he has that in his witness statement, which I'll just show you here. This is the Bureau of Military Witness Statement, John J. Doyle, and he talks about that he said it was only a declaration, it wasn't a note. And many people have kind of looked at members in the Royal Naval Auxiliary. It's important not to mix it up with the Royal Navy. It was a sick bird reserve, and a couple of hundred members, men in St. John Ambulance went off and served in the sick bird reserve. And John J. Doyle does mention that he wasn't one of these that was press ganged into joining the war. It was a declaration, not a note. It's just important to make that. Many of them didn't want to let St. John Ambulance down or themselves. It was just a kind of a camaraderie ship that members had in St. John Ambulance. They were very committed and dedicated. So looking at 1916, and to get an idea and get an understanding of who is in charge, what is the structure. Well, Dr. John Lumsden, his official title was Deputy Commissioner. Okay, so he was the chief in charge. He had 2 deputies, District Superintendent William George Smith, And as you can see, Dr. Ella Webb, and again, these photographs that haven't been seen before. This is the first time this portrait of Dr. Ella Webb has been shown. As you know, she's a founder of the Children's Sunshine Home, which is now Laura Lynn, and Webb Ward is also named after her in Tala Hospital, an amazing lady. So John Lumsden is Chief Medical Officer in the Guinness Brewery, and he's also a physician in Mercer's Hospital in 1916. Well, who's William George Smith? Well, he's the assistant manager in charge of Jacob's Biscuit Factory, going on to be one of the members who served on the executive. He moved to Aintree then later after 1916, a few years after, and served on the executive over in Jacob's Biscuit Factory in Aintree. And Dr. Ella Webb as well, just a really good now kind of physician and pioneer in paediatric medicine during that time too. So William George Smith, he's giving his accounts now of the rising, and to give you an idea and an understanding of it. So he says, picture the conditions, no traffic of course, but glass everywhere around, tram wires caught in big loops lying about, and once we had to stop much against our will. At the top of Cable Street, at the top of Cable Street, and remove yards of telephone wire coiled around our wheels, making progress impossible. Houses party down everywhere, military barricades, and all to be noted and remembered in the daytime, for it was indeed necessary to remember them when out at night. This is taken from William George Smith's witness account, which is dated May 1916, and it's taken from it as it is. So you can see burnt out trams, the Irish volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army members who went out, the rebels who went out and took up arms, started to block off the streets, and the British done the same too. They started to barricade off the streets and make things difficult for them getting around the city. So just to continue on, William George Smith, he says, no street lamps lighting, no houses lighted up, no headlamps on the ambulances, nothing but sticking darkness. So if obstacles were not remembered, the consequences could be awkward. Yet, our driver never made a mistake. He drove carefully but very skillfully and fast and brought us home safe. It's important that I mention here that I credit to the Royal Irish Automobile Club, because they did outstanding work in 1916, and so little has been done to remember, I suppose, some of the work of the Irish Automobile Club, because we staffed the ambulances while their skillful drivers drove them. Okay. Another photograph as well is of Collins Street horses. It was bodies also lied on the ground just like this for days, because members of St. John Ambulance didn't pick up the dead. The reason being is because they had to fill the ambulances with the wounded in order to give the living a chance. So that was something that they really had to do. But afterwards, members are reported burying civilians in the hospitals and also in a garden near Northumberland Road. So these were all the work that was done after the East Rising. So members of the brigade performed duty in all zones where fighting was taking place. And roughly they may be divided into three large areas. From the Customs House to King's Bridge on one hand, from King's Bridge to Dublin Castle, and from the castle to Ringsend, embracing all within the city boundary. So here you have William George Smith looking at Dublin, looking at the rising. He's cycling around Dublin. He looked at some of the zones. He sees the rebels going into St. Stephen's Green, Countess Markievicz and Michael Mallon. And he's almost like a general, kind of strategically looking at Dublin. And he's starting to divide it.